All right, one of the first topics we gotta go back and take a look at here in terms of Algebra 2 is a little bit of the review from Algebra 1 and dealing with expressions. Now again, expressions, the big thing to understand is that there is no equal signs in an expression. And you can't just magically throw an equal sign into an expression, okay, and turn it into an equation. So we have to treat it as like an expression. So when we simplify it, what we're trying to do is get it into the simplest form possible. Meaning, I don't want to see any parentheses. I don't want to see multiple terms that have like pieces. You know, I don't want to see a bunch of x pieces there. I want to combine them all together. Okay. So a couple things we talk about with simplifying expressions is, number one, we want to deal with our order of operations, which, number one, we start out with our groups. Okay, now groups, a lot of times, you know, you've learned about these things maybe as PERMDAS, and so think about parentheses, okay? PERMDAS, GEMDAS, things like that, but I always talk PERMDAS because that makes people think about parentheses. That is one of the possible grouping symbols that you may run into. You may run into brackets. You may run into absolute value. Okay. You may run into a radical, which we also see in step number 2. Okay. But what we're talking about here in this step is taking care of stuff that's on the inside. Simplify what's on the inside of each of those. Okay. All right, second step. Once we've taken care of that, what we want to do is our radicals, which are our roots, our square roots, our cube roots, our fourth roots, and our exponents. Okay. So exponents, sometimes also talked about powers. Again, what that means is that I'm going to take a times itself n times. Okay, we get confused once in a while, and if I have something like 2 to the third, I've seen a lot of times people call that 6. If they wanted you to multiply, they would say 2 times 6. Okay, so just remember it's taking it times itself that many times of whatever your exponent is. Now, another thing that we should do with these is we should always talk about doing my radicals and exponents and working my way from left to right. So what I do is we read left to right. So I start on the left side of my expression. I run through. If I run into a radical or an exponent, I simplify it down. Okay. Next step, I keep going from where I just finished, and I look for any others. If I run into another one, simplify that and keep going. All right. Then we end up jumping into our multiplication and our division. That also we want to start on the left and run into the right. Multiplication and division are the same thing. Division is defined as multiplication by the reciprocal, what I get when I flip my expression over. Okay, is the way a lot of people talk about when my numerator and denominator switch places. Okay, but so we start and go left to right. Okay, and then we finish up with our addition and subtraction, also working our way left to right. Okay, very important. Now, a couple things. A lot of people try and do too much of this in one step. Okay, you should do one thing each time. Okay, and so we'll see some examples of that. Do one thing each time, and then keep moving on. The other thing is, if you have a calculator, most of the current calculators do the order of operations for you if you type it in exactly as you see it. Okay, so a couple things that maybe help you out with that. So for instance, when we simplify these expressions, okay, now, yeah, the order of operations look a little different here when we start throwing variables. But one of the things that we can think about, well, I'm going to do with grouping symbols. There aren't any. I'm going to do with exponents. Well, I do have exponents, okay, q squared. But I can't simplify q squared down, okay? So go to my next step, multiplication. Well, I have 2 times q squared. Well, I can't simplify that down because there's a 2 and there's a q. Okay, all we can do is connect them by multiplication the way we have, 2q squared. But now my addition subtraction, which is our combining of like terms. Okay. What I want to do is like terms, put them together. One, to have like term, has to have the same variable. I put x's with x's, I put y's with y's, okay? I put oranges with oranges, okay? I put desk with desk, okay? So we put those together. The other thing is, if we're talking about variables, they have to also have that same exponent. X squareds can go with x squareds, but x cubes and y cubes can't go together. So I always just tell people, hey, look at your first term. Okay, the variable piece is a q squared. Go in and look for other q squared terms. Now, all we're going to do when we do that is combine my coefficients. And when I combine those coefficients, I just want the number part. So here I have 2 of them. Got to take your sign with it. Okay? And when I combine them, they stay the same. Okay? They don't change in appearance. When I put oranges with oranges, they're still oranges. When I put desk with desk, they're still desk. And they don't become q to the 4th, which is what some people try and do. It's just how many do I have? Now, I know the 2 and the -5 give people trouble. Okay? But what I always say is look at what we have. I have a positive and I have a negative. I have more of the negatives, meaning when I take one positive, one negative, and get those added to 0, meaning there's going to be negatives left over. How many? Big minus small. 5 minus 2. I have 3 negatives left over. If you think about that way a little bit, that can help you with your addition and subtraction when you're dealing with negatives. Okay, got one of each. What do I have more of? Because there's going to be leftovers. How many more? And that way I can always take the big minus small, which is how you dealt with it back early on. Okay, 2nd grade, did big minus small. So those are gone. So then I go and I look at what's my other variables I have here, and it's a q. Well, how many q's? Well, again, remember, there's always a number in front. It's not there again. It's implied to be a 1. So this time I have a 1 and I have a -7. So again, more negatives. Big minus small. More negatives by 6. Now I can't go any farther because what I have is a q squared and a q. Same variable, different exponents. Okay, another way we could do it is we can just use our distribution, which a lot of times is what people think about with our parentheses, is that we're going to distribute, which means, again, we got to take this excuse me, number and distribute it through the parentheses. We have to take that 8 times everything on the inside. So we take it times 8 in the x. Now, take the sign with. So it's 8 times -3, positive and negative, 8 times 3. What I like to talk about with the second one is it's actually a -2 that I'm going to distribute through. So it's a -2 times a positive x. It's a -2 times a positive 6. And now we get down to the point of what we just did up here. I'm going to combine like terms. Okay, so first thing I run into is an x. So I put x's together, I get an x. Okay, I got 8 and I got -2. So I have more positives this time. 8 minus 2 is 6. I have constants. Constants, again, numbers without variables. Okay, I have -24 and I have -12. So here's another situation. 24 and 12, that's 36, no problem. Okay, but when we combine negatives, it's not your multiplication rule where you take a negative times a negative and get a positive. What we have, and I talk about thinking about counting, you have 12 negatives and you have 24 negatives. If I put a group of negatives with another group of negatives, I get a larger group. Okay, so I have 24 negatives. I'm going to put 12 more negatives with it, so altogether I have 36 negatives. Again, I can't go any farther. X is the variable, 36 is a constant. They don't have the same variable. All right, when we evaluate, what we're doing is we're going to say plug it in. Okay, so what I want you to do here first, I'm going to pause the video, and what I want you to do is maybe jot down these expressions, and I want you to simplify it out. Okay, go in and simplify the expression down, because we always want to simplify before we do anything. All right, so there's your simplified form. What I did in yellow, you see -4x squared and 2x squared. So again, I can combine x squared to get x squared. I have 4 negatives, 2 positives, more negatives, 4 minus 2. -6x's, positive 5x's, more negatives again, 6 minus 5 by 1. And that 11 is all by itself. It has nothing to combine with, but it doesn't match up with the others, so we just bring it along. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to plug in x equals -3. Okay, and so my suggestion always is wherever you have a variable is to replace it first with a set of parentheses and then come in here and plug in that number piece that you want to evaluate for. Now, order of operations, groupings. Okay. Yes, I have groupings, but they're already simplified. So I can't do anything in those groupings. Exponent radicals. So like I said, one thing at a time. If I start going here left to right, there's that first radical. Okay, so this is what I'm going to simplify first. Now, -3 squared. Drives me nuts when people say it's -9. Okay, and even if we go and punch it in the calculator, sometimes the calculator kick out -9 because of it doing the order of operations. You have to remember, anytime you square, whoops, not also, always positive. So that's 9. And so then what I tell people is just, bring down what you haven't used yet. Okay, keep going, looking for more radicals that I don't have anymore. Okay, so now I'm ready to go multiplication division. Okay, going through, there's a multiplication. Now is when we look at negative times positive is a negative. Okay, and like I said, I only like to do one step at a time. So I was here, so I keep trucking along, and I see another multiplication here, because this is -1 times -3. So negative and negative now becomes positive. Bring down the stuff we haven't used. Okay. So I was here, I keep working, there's no more multiplications. Now I'm into addition, subtraction, more negatives, big minus small. More negatives, big minus small. Now, as I was saying, if I get a nice calculator, I can type it in exactly as I see it. So if I type in -2, and then I have a left parenthesis, -3, right parenthesis, square it, minus, then again in parentheses, -3. And this is why I tell people to put in parentheses, so now I can have it in my calculator correctly. I get the same answer. Okay, I get the same answer. All right, so hopefully I'll help you out with some simplifying and evaluating. Remember, simplifying, we just want to get it into the fewest number of terms possible, okay, and get some things put together. When we evaluate again, what we want to do is substitute or plug a number in to our expression and see what we get out. Again, do not be throwing equal signs around in this section. All right, good luck with that.